Welcome to the 10-Year Podcast with me, Michael Kwaku, aka ML-Q. Now, this podcast is all about being in real conversation with everyday people that have dedicated over 10,000 hours to their craft over a decade. So ultimately, you can create a blueprint to build a life you love and a legacy to inspire the next generation. On this episode of 10 Years, we are telling a story of what it really takes to be black and from a working class background and breaking into the world of stockbroking and financial planning. Now, it's serious because those barriers are real for most people, but in the financial world, 81% of advisors and analysts are white and just 1% are black. And typically, of those 1%, majority go to the top schools, top universities, and have to get a first-class degree. But today, my guest, Michael G. Donkor, shattered expectations. Coming from a working class background in Hackney and armed with just a 2-2 from university, he broke into the exclusive world of stockbroking and has grown his career into financial planning. He has navigated stereotypes, navigated class to be a representation of what black people can do in the finance world if given the chance. This is a story of grit and determination, and he's willing to share his secrets and journey with you. All you got to do is continue listening. How do you do it? Let's find out. So on this episode, we're welcoming none other than Michael G. Donkor.
Glad to be here, man. Glad to be here.
Can I just say, when I met you, it's mad because I felt that you were my twin.
Yeah, I'm saying.
If not the same person. Let me tell people. 1, both our names are Michael. 2, we're both Ghanaians.
Yes.
4. 3, we both lived in East London. 4, we're both middle kids.
Tough being the middle kid, man.
And 5, you might get murked on dance floor, my friend. Listen.
The energy is there.
You might get murked.
I told you.
So crazy.
My wife said you're my spirit animal.
Listen,
you know what I mean? It's funny.
It's true. We actually call you in my house Sexy and Mike. How disrespectful. Do you know what I mean? That's the name, Sexy and Mike. So anyway, before we get into the 10 years leveling up in the finance game, you had a moment where you met a special person. Who's that person?
Man. Oh man, let's say don't meet your hero, but nah, I had to meet this one. For me, it was Nas, rapper Nas, Nostradamus. And I guess coming from East London, growing up in the ends, it was a lot about latching on to the music and the environment. He was one of the pioneers for me that I learned about storytelling and learned about looking at the ends through the eyes of the observer, not just always being in the midst of it. Yeah. So that was, like I said, my sister posted on LinkedIn and she was like, the only 2 people that he probably want to meet is Nas and Michael Jackson. I'm good now.
You're good.
I can retire.
R.I.P. MJ. Another Michael killing the game, you know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, 100%. The biggest person I've met was Childish Gambino. I was with my good friend of mine, Dr. Kudra Karam. He big up his book, Uncommon Wealth.
Big up. Yeah.
Fellow Ghanaian, smashing it. And we were in a coffee shop. And basically, I just looked left, and I saw Childish Gambino walking by himself in Soho.
No way.
And you and I have a conversation.
Yeah.
Imagine I just got up and walked away, and you talking to me like, how disrespectful, Michael. Basically, I go to him, and rather than say I'm a fat, I just went, Donald! I used his government name, and he just took 2 steps back, raised his shoulder, Mayweather style, as if we're gonna fight.
The southpaw.
The southpaw. I always wondered, as a celebrity, do you want people to approach you or not?
Yes.
And also, if you fanboy them or fangirl them, do they just say, can we...
I had the same thoughts.
So how did you navigate?
I wasn't planning to meet him. Okay. But I was having a meeting with a client and he happened to be there. Wow. I happened to hear someone say, oh, like, Nas isn't there. And I'm sitting there, I was like, did someone just say Nas? So I said, okay, cool. Now I'm sitting there. If he's about to come out, I need to ask some questions. I've done the one thing everybody would do, obviously, is go on Google and ask questions to ask famous people. Done that, but he turned up. I've seen him, and like you said, that fanboy moment. Do you get all giddy? And I saw him. He's managed to notice me, and I've saluted him. Like, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I see you. You see me as well. Okay, cool. Then we've ended up connecting, and it was a great moment. I just said, big fan. Obviously, actually, when I first saw him, I dabbed him. I just treated him like I treat everyone. I said, "What are you doing here?" like he was a friend of mine.
You know what I mean?
And then after that, he gave me a few life gems. And I asked him about, he's been in the game for quite some time, and what would he say is the key life lessons that he's learned throughout that journey. And he was like, make sure you be patient with stuff that you're doing, be positive, trust your instincts, take yourself seriously, but not too seriously. A lot of that resonated with me because it was good to hear from him that he's been through this journey and he's had to navigate that. For me, it was key listening to how he spoke about things, the stories he told, the stories he created.
So would you say Nas was a soundtrack to your youth?
Like I said, there's so many. I Gave You Power, The Message, Undying Love, One Mic, One Love.
My favorite album is Street Disciples.
Wow,
that's my favorite album.
Nazareth.
So that was the soundtrack you growing up in Hackney.
Yeah, definitely. For me, that really hit home in terms of what I was involved in, what I was around, and how to navigate getting through that and figuring out where I wanted to be in life, where I wanted to be in the streets and running around with my friends, or whether I wanted to try and go a different path and make something of myself. And I think everyone gets this opportunity to go through this phase and they make some decisions. And I have some friends which have made those decisions, ended up, on the wrong side of the fence.
As our parents said, if you don't hear, you must feel. Some of our friends really felt.
They really felt it. They really felt it. And they're living through those life experiences. But I think with some of them, they've done really well for themselves. And those experiences have taught them a lot.
So let's talk about Hackney, because we both grew up working class. I think my story was a little different because I was poor in England, but my dad had wealth. Outside England, people, there was homelessness. But then when you go to his yard, 3 stories, 14 settees, 5 bedroom. Do you know what I mean? That's a whole conversation for another time. But I would love to know, what was Hackney like back in the days? We're talking 80s, 90s?
Yeah. So I'm an 80s baby. My parents came in the early 80s. Originally from Ghana, both my parents, but at the time, my dad had migrated from Ghana to Nigeria and then moved over to London.
Wow.
So I grew up in Hackney, East London. Growing up at that time, it was, I wouldn't say survival, but there were so many scenarios that I could have fallen into easily with the influence of people around me. You almost had to make a conscious decision whether you were going to jump into or not. Because I've definitely had friends that have ended up going to jail or people passing away. But for me, it was the opportunity to see what other people were doing and say, nah, I don't want to go that way. Let me try and do something different.
When you talked about how the environment wasn't a nurturing one for anyone in the area, there was a lot of poverty and inequality, and that led a lot of people to look for other means of trying to survive, if not thrive. What would you say were the things that kept you on the straight and narrow, but also kept your future vision and version alive?
The first thing that came to mind when you said that was stay indoors. There was a little bit of stay indoors to try and get out of trouble. I think there was always this feeling of not wanting to disappoint my parents from an educational standpoint. They want to see the A's. They want to see you perform well. In that kind of environment, I was always the youngest person around. Always around older people. And there was always somebody getting into a madness. So I was in a position to foresee it and say, okay, look, I've now seen the consequences of their actions. So I have to choose now if I'm going to continue going down that path, or do I want to try something different? It was me just looking through the window of what Hackney was like at the time and just going, I don't want to end up in that scenario. I don't want to move that way. Let me try something different. I didn't know what that different was, but it just felt like it wouldn't make sense to continue that path and seeing the results that these people were exposed to. At that time, I used to think about what was the end result for them. What was the end goal? And it didn't feel like they moved anywhere because they were still in the end. So for me, it was like, wait a minute, you're doing all this stuff, but you're still here.
There's no progress.
So that's how I looked at it. We're in a big world. There must be something bigger than just being successful in the ends.
Yes.
That felt a bit weird to me.
It's crazy because people that their biggest challenge or their biggest burden is self-belief, but also
Yeah.
the fact that they can't see themselves beyond the hood,
Yeah.
beyond the estate, beyond the bits. I think it's really important that people understand that. One thing
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to my dad for is because of his job, we were able to go and see numerous countries.
Yeah.
And I could see
Yeah.
life outside of the UK. I could see what Yemen looked like. I could see what Kenya looked like. I could see what Ghana looked like. I could see what Senegal looked like.
Yeah.
And how the cultures were different. But also I got to see what black success could be because the ministers were black.
Yeah.
The investment bankers were black. The ambassadors were black. So you're like, oh, wow, like it really does put forward. You cannot be change if you can't see change first. I think that's really important.
I think for me, there was an element of that to some extent. My mum and dad were very keen on trying to go back to Ghana when I was a bit younger. I used to play football when I was younger, and I was able to do football tournaments. There was one in particular, I went to Holland to do a small tournament there, which was great. And that was like my first, I was probably like 12 or 13. So my first time going to another country without my parents and seeing the world in a different kind of lens and thinking there's so much more to the world than just the ends, just the area that I grew up in, so much more opportunity. And I think being able to explore does make you think about things differently. When I used to think about the people I was interacting with, the guys I used to grow up with, at the time, a lot of them hadn't traveled.
Yes.
A lot of them hadn't gone on holidays. So I don't think they looked at it the way I looked at it. I was already...
I'm trying to go global. When you're a young kid and you get to travel abroad, you're like, oh, I can have impact across the globe, not just in my local area. So I was a little man saying, brother, can you hold this for this girl? Saying, oh, we could be friends. You're like, my friend, my queen is Zimbabwe. My queen is in Zimbabwe and you're asking me to stay in Hackney. What's happening? Do you know what I mean? I don't understand.
Go to off license with me real quick, man. That's as far as you could go.
Do you know what I mean?
Nah, I really thought go as far as that I can see, effectively. Yeah, that's how I looked at it.
So you grew up in Hackney.
Yeah.
You end up going to university.
Yep. It was one of those things where I was like, if I don't do this, I'm going to take over the roads. I'm going to become a junkie.
Because it's true. Like,
that was my mentality at the time. It was, if I don't end up going here, I'm going to end up here.
Facts.
So it felt like it needed to happen.
Yeah. What did you study?
I studied economics and accounting, business economics and accounting. At the time, I was quite interested in economics. I wasn't the best at it, but I was really interested in the idea of scarcity and abundance and trying to understand that, because economics is a lot. Economics is about the economy as a collective and thinking about how one thing can impact the other.
Yeah.
It took me a while to understand it, but once I got a taste of it at college in terms of learning economics, when I moved into university, I was like, I want to expand on this. And that kind of evolved into financial investments. And then at the time, accounting.
Wow. So apparently accounting is an art, not a science. And that's why people go to prison. Because they make it an art, not a science.
You just can't balance the accounts if you just know the work and everything. You have to understand it from a different perspective. I tried, and the way it wasn't balancing, it was not working for me. It was
as Michael Dapper said, there was no balancing.
Another Michael.
Of course, you see? From Ghana as well, of course. So that's interesting. And could I ask, I know you said it on other podcasts, but what did you get at uni? What was your final degree?
I got a 2-2.
Okay. How did you feel when you got that 2-2?
It was abuse. I abused myself. Because, you know, for me, it was the last exam. I took a gamble. I think at the time, my teacher set me up, but I took a gamble because it was an international finance exam, and I think there was like 5 topics, and I think at the time she mentioned 2 of them was going to pop up. So I took a risk and I just studied for 2. So I'm in the exam and I'm like, okay, first half has gone well. Then I turn the page over and they start asking me about globalization. And I was like, this was not the topic I studied. This was not the, out of the 5, this was not the 2 I studied. The minute I saw that, I said, I'm getting a 2-2. I did as much as I could, but I left there knowing what was happening.
Yeah, I understand.
Then it was like, okay,
what next?
Because in my head, if I hadn't got the 2-1 or the first, I'm like, how do I square this circle? What do I do next? Okay. And also, it was still at a time where graduate roles was quite competitive. You were there.
Bro, especially around what I call the beginning of the second Great Depression, which was 2008, which we're still not out of. It's not a recession. It is a depression.
Yeah, it was wild. So that was the year I finished uni as well. I accepted it for what it was. And I was like, okay, what next? What is the plan? And fortunately enough, I found a role in the bank.
Before we continue with Michael's story, here's a quick message from our sponsors, the Black Secret Education Project. Hey guys, I've worked in African business for over 15 years and frequently heard comments like, Africa is a basket case. I mean, Europe civilized Africa and should recolonialize it to make better use of their resources. Now, for years, these comments and much, much worse, which you probably hear in future episodes of the podcast, made me question the value and pride of my Black identity and most importantly, my African heritage. But everything changed when I met a man called Robin Walker, who was an African Union historian. Over 3 transformative years, he unveiled 200,000 years of Black achievement, revealing the indelible fingerprints of Black people on the tapestry of human history. And now for the first time, Mr. Walker has distilled his 30 plus years of research into an online course that will empower you with the knowledge of what Black people achieved throughout history across the world. And as a limited time special offer, tenured listeners get a whopping 50% off Robin's course. So check out the link in the show notes. And remember, knowledge is power, but power is progress.
Retail banking.
And retail banking is basically what, you have your money, it goes to the cashier, they put them, all that stuff.
All of that stuff there. So I was in one of the branches in East London. I was acting as a personal banker, customer service, serving the people. It was funny because in the area that I was in, you see the range between the posh guy that will walk in and throw in like 20 grand, 50 grand. And then you'll see the street dancer on the side walking in and just shouting the branch off because they needed £20.
I love how you say the street dancer.
Yeah, no, because there was one time one guy came in and I saw him dancing in front of the cash machine. I was like, what's happening? Is this how everyone's getting their money out?
He was dancing for the money gods.
Yeah, honestly. The range was ranging. There was a lot happening there. But yeah, that was my first experience in finance. At the time, I didn't realize what I was getting myself into, but it was about helping people open accounts, dealing with personal loans, credit cards. So speaking to people about that. And then it started to evolve into pensions, insurance. And that's when I started to get a better understanding of what would eventually be like financial advice.
In other words, what I'm hearing from you is that you're able to connect the degree, theory, to the individual's money, to, okay, this is how the world works when it comes to pensions, investments, and that kind of stuff. It's like future security and how it impacts the world.
Yeah, because there's always the macroeconomics and the microeconomics. So looking at the smaller aspects of things and how it impacts the bigger things. And it was me speaking to these people on the ground, hearing all the stories, the good and the bad, and then realizing that all of it is connected to some extent.
When you were in the bank, probably not earning a lot of money, but seeing money, you were counting them. What did you say? What would you say you learnt, or what would you say inspired you to say, I need to be on the other side?
It was 2 things. So I think I talked about in one of the other podcasts about working with a financial advisor, and I was passing him leads. He was getting business done. And then I got an email one day and he's told me, well done, thanks for that client. They've signed up. I'm helping them with their pension. He was supposed to, or he probably was, but it was, look, here's my commission. I maybe need to be transparent with this. And then here's what you're getting for this. And I was getting points and he was getting money. That was the first awakening of wanting to be a financial advisor. The one thing that made me wake up from moving out of the bank itself, I was working with a lady there. She was actually the same age as my mum, same birthday as well. She was basically my work mum. She was amazing. I remember speaking to her one day and I said, how did you get here? Well, you don't really know someone's story, but you've been working with us. How did you get here? She was like, back in my day, I had the kids and I was working as a cashier. I got in around 16. One day I woke up and I was still hit. That kind of hit me differently because I was like, if I'm not intentional about this, although there's nothing wrong with the progression of where she was in her life and how it suited her, I was like, if I don't intentionally sit down and think about what I actually want, I could be here in the next 10, 15 years and not even realize it.
Facts.
And that was when I woke up and said, I need to sit down. I need to put a plan together. What am I trying to do? And that coincided with speaking to the financial advisor, seeing what he was doing and realizing that's where I want to be. So I found some qualifications to study to be a certified financial planner or a financial advisor. There was a certificate called the CFA and started to study that. And
how long does it take to do the CFA in terms of length of time, but also hours studying per day, would you say?
Yeah, so it was quite an interesting one. I think at the time, there was probably like 3 or 4 exams. I did like a UK financial regulation exam and I passed that exam. I think I had 2 more to do. And I stumbled across these level 3 exams in securities under the CISI. And that's when I transitioned into stockbroking and moving into that space. So just to answer your question, when I moved into that studying, I took about 9 months to get those qualifications out of the way. So there was 3 exams. So I did one every 3 months. I just gave myself a bit of time. Same thing I was doing when I was teaching some of my brokers to study. It was pretty much, look, don't rush it. Give yourself time to really understand the content. Go through the exams and test yourself over again so that when you get to the 3rd month, you're ready to take the exam. I just did that every 3 months. I passed the first one. The reason why I did that is because when I took my first one, I failed it. I was like, okay, I need to go back and think about my setup, my structure. And that's why I did it that way. After that, I passed all of them straight away. And then I became qualified around 2010, 2011. So I had my level 3 CISI in securities. Yeah.
I find it interesting because you mentioned failing your first exam. I think that you needed to go through those in order to understand actually how do you study. Because I find very few schools teach you how do you learn and then allow you to apply that knowledge to how you learn and set up the structure. People aren't dumb. Do you know what I'm saying? Like people are not stupid. It's just that they haven't found a way of helping them retain knowledge and then connect the dots to achieve whatever goal they're trying.
Yeah, for me, it was repetition. I needed to be in a position to repeat the process so that I could understand what I was going through so that I can put it in practice in the exam. So I needed to give myself enough time to do that. Once I was able to do that, it was a fairly straightforward process going through the exam and getting the marks and then moving on to the next one and just repeating and repeating. But I had to learn that through that journey because although university was good, you only have like one opportunity to do it. You get the 2 2s, okay, that's it. Unless you're going to go back and do the whole 3 years again.
But I know people that spent 5 years doing a 3-year degree. I don't have that money, so I can't do that. So
especially at this new tuition fee. Yeah, I did that. I got it out of the way. And the one thing I've learned from that process is, especially in finance, you always need to be studying something.
Facts.
So you always need to be ready and prepared to learn again.
Always be studying something. I want to ask you about a particular situation when you realize that you've qualified. Essentially, you now can be a stockbroker. You can be. Important word, can be. And then you realize that actually when it comes to finance, the world of finance, investment, stockbroking, actually, there's 2 issues. 1, your race, and 2, your class. I just want to give you a stat. The Chartered Institute of Securities and Investment, 2015 to 2019, said that the majority, 81% of financial analysts and advisors are white. 12% are minorities, of which Asian is majority. 1% are black. 1% are black. And then when you deep it really, that 1% went to the top schools and the top universities and got first. My question for you is, man's got a 2-2,
You're like, how'd you get in?
You say, how did you get there? But also, how did you navigate those stereotypes to be able to get in the room, interview, but also thrive in those rooms as well?
It's interesting because I think having the qualification got me through the door initially. Even when I was going in as a stockbroker, I had the qualifications. I was like, okay, what do I do now? So I started looking around and I didn't really know where to go because the graduate roles weren't really trying to take me because of my degree. So I had to look at all of the boutique, smaller outfits in the city. A lot of them were in Moorgate at the time. And I was advertising here and it was a bit of a minefield because I remember even I went to one firm that I joined just before I joined my boutique firm. And I thought it was going to be a proper outfit. I remember going in and they were like, okay, yeah, so we're a small stockbroking outfit, but we're issuing carbon credits. that brought a flashback, innit?
I started sweating.
Yeah.
Just so you guys know, carbon credits, especially in that day,
Yep.
it's what altcoins are to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's altcoins. Okay, keep talking.
Yeah. The carbon credits at the time, emissions, air emissions, and you can offset your emissions by buying land in different areas in Brazil. And this is me going in like as a novice thinking, okay, I'm qualified, but I'm now going to specialize in this particular area. So I've joined this firm and I think I was there for about a week. And the first week was this training. I don't remember the name of the firm. At the end of the week, I'm in Moorgate and we've gone down to a bar. I'm sitting down with these guys. We're having drinks. And sometimes it's good to just be quiet and listen. As I was sitting with these guys, they started to unravel that they've joined the firm or they've been here for a couple of months. And one of them said, oh yeah, I'm just about to do my exams. I said, wait a minute, you've not done your exams yet? And they're like, oh, I never said. And I was like, what is going on here? This isn't adding up. So I'm the most qualified person here. Wow. Because I'd done my exams.
Yes.
And I thought you needed your exams to be qualified. And then it hit me that this ain't regulated. What I'm sitting in is a regulated environment. So I was like, yeah, okay, good to see you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. I went home. I did not come back.
Proper boiler room.
Boiler Room.
Great film. If you haven't watched Boiler Room, watch Boiler Room.
To be fair, Boiler Room was probably part of the reason I ended up in this space as well, because I saw that lifestyle and the idea of being a broker and kind of going into that environment as a young mid-20s. And it was really just a case of going somewhere where you can get the environment of adrenaline, getting on the phones, fast pace, and making money. But not realizing that there was all these other layers that I needed to consider. So like the regulation aspect of things. So I ended up leaving that firm. I kept applying and then a small firm found my CV. The reality was they didn't know who I was. But when I turned up, I could tell it was like, oh, like, how did you get here? A little bit. Nobody really said it, but it was
a look.
Yeah, it was a look of impression. Like, you know, you look.
Yes.
And look, I still look young, but I look like a baby back then.
Was a bit? Did you have a beard?
And our family, we did start at 21, but it wasn't strong like this.
Okay.
But I remember walking in and I had to have an interview with 2 or 3 people. One of them was one of the senior brokers as well. They put me through the test. They asked me a lot of questions about the economy, about my study, my background. I think what really helped me was just the personal aspect of it. Taking time to study the qualification, it was the fact that I was able to communicate well with them, that they could see, actually, this guy's come in, there's 3 or 4 of us, and he didn't seem too intimidated.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm always interested in what other people are like and what they're doing. So I always ask questions. Yeah. You see it online now on Instagram and LinkedIn, like, here's how you pass the interview, you ask these questions and everything. For me, I was just curious. Like, how did you get here? What area are you from? How did you get into that job? I was just curious because it was a new world for me. Yeah. I probably had about 3-4 interviews and then they gave me a role as a junior. It was like a junior equity dealer at the time. So
can you give me a broad understanding of salary? Because a lot of people hear stockbroking and you see big bucks and just so we understand what the reality is.
So, in that space, I probably would have been on like $1,500 a month, like 18 year old or something like that. Because that whole space is about commission. Yeah. Even the firm that I talked about before, there was no salary. It was commission only.
What?
And there's a lot of firms or a lot of roles at the time where you would start with a low salary or no salary. Yeah. Because it's a sales role. The whole purpose of it is that you generate business through sales and get people on board and you get commission off the back of that. So there was always this OTE that you see on job, OTE 100 grand, OTE.
What does OTE stand for?
I don't
even know. Nobody knows. I know, but
they just knows that there's not a salary.
It's not a salary. Don't look for that. You know where there's an OTE tick box? Unclick that, my friend. Because I need my mortgage.
There's no OTE mortgage.
Facts.
So I jumped in there and I'm at home at this time. Mum and dad's at home, Hackney still. So it was easy to come into Moorgate, could save some money. But I was at the ground starting up, isn't it? So I went in and started learning my craft. And it was an interesting environment because it was the first time where I felt like I was really tested. And for so many reasons, because I'd walked in as the youngest person there, mainly as the only black guy on the dealing floor.
Wow.
I'm now having to navigate having these conversations with people on the other side of the phone that I'm not even looking at. So where I've learned to my craft, looking at people and speaking to them, now having to go into an environment where I'm having to interact with them over the phone, and I'm questioning whether my race, how I sound, my tone,
Of course.
was coming across
Of course.
the phone as well. Whether I'm talking with a bit of slang, with an accent, something is just sounding a bit off. It was on the back of my mind a lot, so I had to be very mindful of how I was speaking over the phone.
Yeah. I hear that because it is very interesting how, as a black person, I read this really good book called Navigating Stereotypes. And it talks about how you're often not compared against your colleague, you're compared against your stereotype.
Yes.
And so when you're on the phone, your last name, your first name, what blackness is, what Africanness is, in terms of how it's perceived in the popular media.
Yeah.
And so you have to, in the first 5 seconds, start to pinprick a little hole in that balloon and let the air slowly come out and say, no, this is me.
Yeah.
So I can imagine, especially when you're on commission as well, you have to build trust, demonstrate credibility, show you're knowledgeable, you're not lazy, all the negative things that are essentially against the negative stereotypes and get that sell. So
because I'm a Donkor, that's my surname. But if I jumped on the call and I'm like, hey, it's Michael Jampo Seki Donkor from X company, how are you? And they're like, yeah, what was that again? Shout out to one of my colleagues, Tom Smith, that I used to work with. There were, over a period of time, he used to take note of all the different names that I used to get called on the phone. Then we'd go through it because it was just random names. Certain clients, even clients that I knew, they'd be like, yeah, it's like Mr. Donakov there. Everyone, sometimes I feel like everyone gets it, but then I was like, this is only my name that we're taking to this.
And it's not a hard name, it's 2 syllables, my friend.
Yeah.
6 letters.
It was the environment I was in. I didn't really take offense to it.
Yeah.
I think that's also something that I had to navigate. I think it's different now, but at the time, I almost felt like I'm in their world a little bit, and I just got to figure out how to navigate in this world.
I think number one is the impact of racism during that time is not getting a job, getting punched in your face, being chased. Do you know what I mean? Like, you having your name misspelled, missaid is...
To this day, people still spell my name with an E instead of an O. Sometimes I feel they do it on purpose now, because I'm like, nah, come on, man. You've known me.
Donkor. Michael Donkor.
Yeah. So,
that's really, really helpful to know. And I think a lot of people understand the mindset to go into these often boutique companies. Can you explain the kinds of stocks you were selling, but also can you explain what a stockbroker actually does?
Yeah, so a stockbroker is essentially a middleman of sorts. The whole idea of a broker is to broker a deal. So have an arrangement between the individual that's trying to buy a share and the market that's trying to sell the shares. Okay. And at the time, I would call my clients and recommend a share that had some potential value or upside. I would agree either a price or a price that we were recommending the share at. We would broker the deal. The client would say, hey, I want to buy this share. I'd say the share's at this price. I can get you X amount of shares based on how much you're trying to invest. And if you're happy to do that, I'll put the transaction through. We had to write the trades on little tickets.
Yes.
And then put the tickets over to compliance and stuff like that. So that's how old I am, those kind of stages.
Wow.
But so the broker was in a position where they had a lot of information about these companies, and they would recommend and get the clients on board to invest in those companies with the belief that those companies could do well. So that's essentially what the broker role was. I was spending time on the phone speaking to clients, to market makers. The market makers were essentially the guys that were dealing with some of these shares and pricing these shares for the general public. And the reason why I mentioned market makers, because at the time I was investing in the small cap market in the AIM, the alternative investment market, for majority of my trades with clients.
And that's what companies with less than £250,000.
Things like 250 to 750, I think around the time in terms of being registered on the AIM market.
Yes.
And those companies are usually up and coming, usually in early stage areas. A lot of the companies that we were dealing with were like mining, oil and gas, small tech companies as well at the time. And the market makers were dictating the prices, and that's quite different to maybe the larger London Stock Exchange, because there's a lot of online trading, direct execution, where these guys was over the counter a lot of the time. You got to get a price, and sometimes if you built a proper relationship, or there was opportunity to buy more shares, then you could get slightly better prices depending on what they were offering.
So you on the AIM market, the big boys on the FTSE 100, 250, whatever it is. One, did you set your sights to try and get into the big boys, essentially? Two, how did you get past no? Because any salesperson, no is like a slap in the face, but you got to learn to take a slap in the face. And to get to the big boys, you had to get through a lot of no's. And I want to know like how you navigated that.
In terms of getting to the big boys, how do I get into a position where I can be trading these larger companies?
Sure.
So the FTSE 100 companies, the Rio Tintos of the world, the Vodafones, thinking that was the place I needed to be at. It wasn't really, because I was still making money.
Exactly.
But I felt like, to almost feel like I've justified getting to where I need to get to, I needed to be up there. Okay. Now, getting past the no's at the time, you had to be resilient. You had to accept that the no was coming. You know what I mean? And I guess the best way I could describe it is almost like trying to get a girl's number back in the day.
With an Argos pen in the back of the wallet. Then thank you, Barclays and Argos, for those free pens. You really did create a lot of relationships. Thank you.
It's funny because even back then I used to try to describe it in that manner of like having the conversation and being okay with the rejection, being okay with the idea that at some point the client's going to say no, but you need to almost look at it from a perspective of it's just not the right opportunity for them. I used to tell clients, like, or the juniors I was working with, we're going to go on the phones and practice getting rejected.
Oof.
You need to be thick skinned. You need to be comfortable with rejection. But if next time I can provide this opportunity to you, would you be of interest to you, especially if you miss this one and it goes up, does that sound? Then it's okay. And then, by the way, how's your dog doing?
Yes.
You know, and you get back in. If something else comes up, I'll let you know. And then when something else comes up, they remember you and building rapport. But a lot of the rapport was always around the one thing I used to try to tell the guys I was working with. I don't care if you get the no. I just want you to find out something interesting about them.
Oof. Let's talk about the culture. What was the culture like within the stockbroking world? Maybe you can mention films so people get an understanding. Is it industry like Wolf of Wall Street and Wall Street, the 1990s film as well? What is it like? But also, how do you navigate it as someone that's working class and someone that's black as well? And basically a double minority.
I almost walked into it. I don't know if it was naivety, but I just walked into it. I'm just one of the boys. So I tried my best not to look at it as I'm different from them. I grew up in the same areas to some of them. I grew up in London. We had similar experiences depending on where they grew up as well. We were interested in similar things. We shared the same clubs that we were interested in. We almost knew some of the same people or were connected to certain people in the industry as well. So the environment was pretty relaxed, and you start to build a relationship with the people that you work with. In terms of the environment, it was always quite vibrant. It was always quite fast paced. There was always a lot of energy. Power hours, shout out to the Power Hour and the Power Hour team. If you were there, it was always high energy. And I think you needed that at that time. Because especially when you're facing the world and expecting the no on the next call, you needed to be able to go, all right, that was just one. Let me go and do the other one, and do that 100 times and be okay with it and go home. That wasn't easy. So you needed that energy and that environment of we're all in it together, we're all in the trenches together.
So you moved from stockbroking into personal financial advice and planning. What was the moment that you were like, you know what? I think I'm done with this. It was
around 2017. The firm that I was at, had made a few changes. I was managing a team with two colleagues of mine. We had some brokers that we were working with that were under us as well. At the time, the margins were starting to tighten up in terms of the kind of business that we was doing. But also, it was weird. It was almost like I was studying for my CFA at the time because I thought I needed my CFA to be a financial advisor. And I just remember thinking, I forgot I wanted to be a financial advisor. And I've done all of this. I thought now's the time to actually take this long-term plan seriously. There was one guy I was working with who, I always feel like there's people that I've been positioned in my life.
Yeah.
And I've always looked at them as my future self. And that's when it hit me. There was a guy that I was working with. I remember him talking about all the fun stuff that he was doing as a broker back in the day, all the cars he had and everything. But then he was sitting right next to me, trading clients with me.
Okay.
And he was twice my age. And it was coming across as if he needed to be here.
Liabilities were high.
His lifestyle was, okay, I've lived this lifestyle, now I'm having to make up for it.
He's like Rishi from Industry.
Yeah.
Without the gamble. Season 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That show is wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I saw that and I was questioning whether this was a long-term career for me. I'm not saying that it isn't for other people, but for me, I was, okay, how do I navigate this from a long-term perspective? And then it just brought me back to financial advice and the idea that I wanted to come into this to build relationships with people and grow with people and advise them on their investments. But now there was an opportunity to think about it from a longer term, whereas I could only think about the next trade and the next month, and how much money to make the next month. Although there are similarities in the space, it was very much short term and it was hard to navigate the long-term plans with that.
So you saw your future. And
Yeah.
You said, my friend,
Yeah, I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but at the time it just felt like I needed to make the jump early on. So I had the opportunity to transition in and grow. So I started to look at my options. And that was partly why I started the CFA. I thought through that process, a company reached out to me about going to Geneva. And I was like, oh, another opportunity to get out the ends and explore. I spoke to them and I ended up going there. It was a bit of a tussle with the wife to say, hey, plan to do this and see how you feel about that. But I was genuinely interested about going abroad and bringing the family out there and moving into that space. Yeah.
Let's talk about Geneva. So was it the same broking or was it actually financial advice you would be giving with that firm?
It was financial advice and it was a bit of a learning curve because I was going into the offshore market.
Remember I mentioned altcoins? Offshore's Bitcoin with a bit more pollution. It's a bit more iffy.
But I think there was still a lot of opportunity to grow. I had walked into this space with the idea of, okay, I'm an advisor, I'm going to build up these clients and grow. And I walked into this company and I just realized, oh, maybe this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. Yeah. So there was still that element of broken element, energy within that.
Yes.
And growing through that, figuring out how to navigate now in a different country, in a different environment, different culture.
And you're by yourself.
And I'm by myself. I went there by myself for about 6 months. Navigating that without the family and the network around you, which wasn't easy, getting into a rhythm of how to live by day, learn a different language and get the job done.
It's hard. A lot of people go to what they think is their dream job and realize actually it's not my dream job or something adjacent to it. And I think it's really good to fail fast. It's not about, it's about actually understanding your situation fast, reading the room so you know, okay, actually, I don't want to be here, and make that quick.
Because even when I was broken and I was bringing people on, there was definitely times when I had to like maybe get rid of people or fire somebody. For me, it was always about being honest with them with the fact that this wasn't for them and letting them know, look, I don't think this is for you. I don't think this is where you should be.
Facts.
And you're young enough to change and really pivot and make that transaction. So I'm hoping that within that, I've definitely had one or two scenarios where they'll screw you in what it is, but I've definitely had scenarios where they're like, thanks for letting me know. I can now go and look at something else. And I think sometimes we don't always get that conversation.
Especially young. A lot of the time we might figure out that actually I really want to do that thing. I was really talented at the thing, but you find out when you're 30. Yeah. When you got 2 kids. It's hard. It's better to find out fast.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, find out fast, 100%.
Definitely.
My last question around Geneva. I'm sure the potential for money was
Yeah.
good, especially in the offshore market. Just for people that don't know, the offshore market essentially is where some bad things happen. A lot of the biggest companies in the world hold their assets offshore. Big individuals, celebrities, billionaires. However, also offshore, you have weapon dealers, drug dealers. You
There's
know,
a wide range. And you need to know
exactly
this,
what you're involved in.
Like who's sitting next to you?
Yeah.
What's he doing? Why is he talking about ammunition? You got to read the room and
Offshore's
understand what's
offshore.
going on. Offshore is usually considered a tax haven in terms of going to certain places, Gibraltar, Cayman Islands, and everything. There is some benefit of using those areas for your financial planning. But again, it was just one aspect I got exposed to, thinking it was going to be something else.
Yeah.
And realizing this is just one side of the coin. Is this where I want to be? Is this what I want to be involved in? And I decided it's not where I wanted to be eventually.
So you came back to London.
Came back to London.
Your wife was happy.
Yeah.
Very, very happy. And you got into financial planning. How did you do that?
When I came back, there was another transition in terms of qualification, because you needed to have the retail distribution reviews. Back in 2012, they changed the rules. Prior to that, stockbrokers and advisors only needed certain qualifications. Some of the older advisors didn't actually need to be qualified in the sense of having a qualification to be an advisor. The RDR came in to basically say, hey, we need to have a minimum requirement, minimum level 4 qualification for you to continue to advise, or level 6 at the time, depending on where you was. So I came back as a level 4 qualified individual. However, I didn't have the exact exams that I needed to provide financial advice. When I went to a firm and I told them what I was doing and where I was, they were like, hey, you just need this exam. Do this exam, you're good to go.
Great.
So I did that. It took me about a month or two, did the same routine. And then I was back in and started in that firm and again, navigating what that was. Because now I was similar to what I was doing in Geneva, but I was running around face to face, going to meet people and now thinking about building longer term plans as opposed to being on the phone and making these transactions that I was doing as a broker.
I want to ask the question because a lot of people don't know when they need a financial advisor.
Yeah.
And one of my first jobs, I was earning...
Yeah.
Very much like your early career as well. I think I was earning £18,000.
Yeah.
That's £1,100 after tax every month.
Yeah.
Very, very. I couldn't afford Starbucks. I couldn't even afford to date, to be honest. It was mad. And I want to know, like, at what point do people need a financial advisor?
I would say people need a financial advisor when they ask themselves that question.
Oof.
Because it's at that point that they realize something is not...
The math isn't math.
The math isn't mathing. I need to speak to someone about it. So the minute they start asking themselves, do I need a financial advisor? I think that's the moment they need a financial advisor, because they need to at least have the conversation with one.
Yeah.
If they speak to the right person, it's either going to give them an insight on where their shortfall is, or maybe tell them they're not there yet in terms of what they need to do. Here's a few steps that they need to consider. The industry has expanded and there's a lot of space for the financial coaching piece as well, which I've done for some clients. That same person asking that question could go to a financial coach or a financial advisor. A financial advisor is somebody that is supposed to give you an insight on how to address your finances based on your goals.
Oof.
And your objections. Okay. Now, if you have a financial advisor that is keen to look at your whole picture and goals, they might be in a position to say, hey, this sounds great, James or John, you need to go and speak to this mortgage broker, because your financial advisor has now been in a position to understand your situation and identify the best course of action. Not just how much money you should be making,
facts,
but also what's the best course of action for your actual goal. So if your goal is to buy a house or get out of debt, depending on where you are in your journey, and you speak to a financial advisor, they may be in a better position to say, you shouldn't be speaking to me right now. You should be speaking to Citizens Advice Bureau or a financial coach, or going to your bank and speaking to them about your debt, or speaking to this individual. And that is essentially what that financial advisor should be doing. If you have the funds or you're in that position and you've asked yourself that question and you have the right mindset now, which is usually what I call like the world of adulting. Once you get into that world of adulting, you're like, okay, I need to sort stuff out.
Yeah.
Having that financial advisor would be quite powerful for you.
What's the difference between a financial advisor and a financial planner?
A financial advisor is a regulated individual that would be advising you on a specific area or specific product. A financial advisor could be someone that advises only on pensions, or only on investments, or even only on insurance. A financial planner is an individual that will look at your situation from a holistic perspective. So looking at it from the bird's eye view and understanding where you are, what goals you're trying to achieve, and how you aim to get there. Within that financial plan, there will be elements of financial advice.
Yeah.
So in most cases, a financial planner is a financial advisor. Not all cases, a financial advisor is a financial planner. Does that make
sense?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I just want to bring it down to the grassroots because many of us in our community would have had this conversation or have seen it go down. An uncle and auntie dies.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you realize there's no will. There are a few illegitimate children. He might have had a second wife or another cousin that he gave the deeds to. Then you realize that you are in a financial mess, of which there are people less fortunate than yourself that see that inheritance as their only way of surviving the next 10 years. And they may want to kill you to secure it. Do you know what I mean?
It's real.
Or in the UK and the West, and it's often again, in Africa and Asia, it's like someone passes away and there's inheritance tax and you had no idea how to even navigate it, how to do with probate, or your parents are sick, you need to put them into care and you haven't budgeted for it. You want to get married by the age of, let's say 30, and you're doing a chicken and chips job and there's no money for the wedding and you have to pay culturally as the man. So it's like actually helping people understand and navigate their cultural milestones and not come out broke and decrepit.
But also I think it's about prioritizing.
Facts.
What is the important thing that you're trying to achieve right now?
Yeah.
Someone asked a question about saving for a mortgage and whether you put all your money into it or you like split the money across. Again, it really comes down to how important it is for you to buy that house.
Yeah.
And whether it's something that you need to do now or it's something that you can wait on. And that's essentially what the advisor should be there to help you with.
Helping people plan 10 years and beyond.
Yeah.
You've shared more than 10 years of experience. What are the next 10 years looking like for you?
That's a good question. For me, my interest is to grow businesses and have assets in these businesses, not necessarily just on the stock market, but actively be involved in business. I think there's a difference between the two. One is passive in terms of investing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's important. You shouldn't be investing over time. The other is about building opportunities. For me, it's about creation. When I think about these things, as well as the idea of wanting to be wealthy, the one thing I want to do is be in a position to create. If I can create business opportunities, get them off the ground and position them somewhere, then hopefully that will help me with my wealth, success and goals.
Michael, my twin, you've dropped some bars. I just want to highlight 3 or 4. One is that when you enter a new career or company, ask people for their stories. Because that will determine whether you want to stay in that culture, in that company, and even in that field. 2 is be intentional, and always continually learn and study. And if you're not studying for qualification, read books. Be a good listener. Be resilient. Build relationships, not to profit from someone, but to understand who they are and why they are.
Yeah, so important.
That's a lot of lessons. There's still more to come. There's still more to come.
Honestly, but I think it's been an interesting journey. I've met a lot of people through my journey so far, and
I think at tenure, that's what we're trying to do: give people the gems of 10 years of experience, of knowledge. So it means that you're not making the same mistakes that someone else has made, and can actually help you level up quicker. Michael G. Donkor, not Donkor. Thank you so much. Welcome to Tenured. This is the first, not the last.
Yes, we have landed.